My name is Alyssa Hughes. I am the farm manager here at Urban Roots Farm in Springfield. We are a 1-acre urban 4-season produce farm. And go ahead and go to the slide. Let's see. Yeah, so this is a little bit about my experience. I've worked in landscaping basically since I was 14, different garden centers, nurseries, and then I've been at this urban farm for the past 7 years. So.
That's amazing. Great. So we do have a poll, and I wanted to let everyone know that there is a chat within Zoom, and if you have any questions during this workshop, I will see the question and I will ask Alyssa personally. So feel free to input any questions in the chat as we get started.
Okay. Are we waiting on the poll?
It looks as though we only have 3 attendees, but we could do the poll now. Yeah, I think if you enable the poll now, it'll pop up for people as they come in.
Cool.
Alyssa, you have a lot of experience.
Yeah. This is pretty much the one field I've worked in other than restaurants. Yeah.
Did you help start Urban Roots Farms?
No, it's 10 years old, so I showed up in the 3rd year. So they had already done most of the really hard structure building. So yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see, it's 8:03. We might as well get started.
Okay. Cool. So it looks like everybody's growing in raised beds, and one person is doing it to make some side income. So cool. A lot of this presentation is really technical for larger growing, but some of it does apply to smaller backyard options. So, and as I talk, feel free to put questions out there, and Hannah will let me know that a question's been asked and I can address that.
Will do.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it's my experience. So I'm just gonna jump right in. Why should you invest in irrigation? 1, it's a time saver. Your plant health overall is going to be better in the long run if you're consistently watering and in control of the amount. It's also good for your mental health. It's going to save you money over the long haul and save you from overwatering as well as underwatering. We have one plot that currently isn't on. It's hooked up to irrigation, but it's still not on a timer. And without fail, you know, I think I'm going to set a timer on my phone and I'm going to remember to go shut it off. And without fail, at least once a week, I either forget to water or way overwater. So sure other people have experienced that.
Do you have a schedule, like a written out schedule that you go by for your watering system?
No, I usually just start it in the morning based on what the weather's been, especially like the past couple weeks. It's finally gotten into those warmer temperatures where it's above 80. We had a ton of rain all spring, like a ridiculous amount of rain. So I really haven't had to think about watering that specific plot, and I haven't had to do much overhead watering. Just, yeah, so much rain. But yeah, now that it's hot all of a sudden and the rain has stopped, it's time to start paying attention. So
awesome.
So jumping into timers, this is just kind of like ground zero, the basics, and I feel like timers are a good place to start. There's lots of different options out there. You can do it with one hose. There's different timers that have splitters that allow you to go up to 6 hoses. There's electric ones or ones that need batteries or some sort of power outlet, or their, I'll show you the dial timer that doesn't need any batteries. I have used Orbit's a lot in the past, and Ace Hardware, their name brand timers. And they're okay, they don't last a super long time, but the Ratio and the Rainbird have really great reviews, and I do have experience with the Rainbird and have been really happy with it. So this is the dial timer that I was talking about. You can see that it's all plastic, so it's probably not going to hold up a super long time, even if you take really good care of it. They're around $20 at Lowe's. I have had these fail within the matter of months. So like 3 months in, I twist the timer on and come back, you know, end up walking by that plot an hour or two later, and it's still watering because it never shut off. So this timer, as with other timers, they're great to put in place, but there's always a chance that they can fail. If you do use this timer, you're going to get it to last longer if at the end of the season you spray it out with water and lubricate the dial with WD-40 before storing it. Here is an electrical timer. So this does require a couple AA batteries. You can see it's just a single hose application. It's just as cheap as the dial timer, and it has really great reviews. The nice thing about this one is you can set the different, you can like set the clock and the time, and then it'll just go off automatically, where the dial timer, you have to remember to turn it on. You don't have to remember to shut it off. This one just will automatically do it as long as the batteries continue to work. And it's nice because it has a 12-hour repeat option. So when it's really hot and really dry, you can water at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. I have a little video clip of that. Nope. Where'd you go? So this is the dial timer. It's really straightforward. You just twist it and you can see it can go up to 120 minutes. Again, it's plastic. You connect it to the spigot there on the right and to the hose on the left. And then here is the Ace Hardware brand single hose timer. You can set the clock, you can set the start time. You can also change how long. There are 2 different stations on this because there's 2 different hoses. So both hoses don't have to run for the same amount of time. They can come on at separate times, and they can run for different amounts of time. And yeah, you can have one that's every other day and one twice a day. So there's that. Oh, and then the nice thing about this is if you ever walk by and notice that your plants need water, there's always a manual button. This is a 4 hose option, basically the same, just with 4 stations instead of just 2. That has a little remote that can pull out to make it more easily accessible. And then this is a 4-unit timer. It's nice because these are not all attached, so you could even have 2 different spigots if they were close to one another with all on the same timer. And that's the Orbit's brand. Okay. Okay, and then this is the rain machine. This is really from the hose timers, you're looking at like $20 to $40. I think one of the Ace Hardware ones is $60. But then Once you get to a rain machine, it's really going up in price, but it also is a pretty significant jump in quality. This one was $100, and I think the one pictured has 8 options. We have one that was around 160, and it has 16 different station options. This is really nice because it automatically, you can connect it to a weather app so that it'll automatically adjust depending on how much rain your area is getting. Also, cloud cover, if it's really cloudy, even if it's not raining, you can see the different percentages of how much it's raining or how much it's going to water. With the rain machine ones and also with some of the ratio ones, you can also control them from an app on your phone, which is really nice. And the thing to consider if you are going to do something like this is you're going to need to install it in a location that has access to electricity and to the internet. We had trouble installing ours because we're in a very, we're right in the middle of a block. There's a lot of homes with wireless internet around us, and so I kept trying to switch between what wireless service it was trying to grab onto, but an Ethernet cord is able to fix that pretty easily. And the other ones are all batteries or just the dial one without batteries, but this one you have to wire in. So when selecting a timer, actually, let me show that video really quick.
Okay, so we have a question from Laura. The question is the rain machine PoE or does it require a separate power source?
It does require a separate power source, so that one you have to plug in to just a regular outlet. So this is our rain machine, and you can see that it is actually wired in. So this one's not connected to hoses. This is one that's going to actually be connected to your plumbed in irrigation lines that are wired in and have different diaphragm options that open and close once they're hooked to the system. It has a lot of different programs. So you can have any different increments of plots running at different times. It's nice because the start time you can connect to sunrise or sunset. So you can set it like 30 minutes after sunrise or 2 hours before sunset. And then the one thing that does annoy me about this one is that as far as the frequency goes, it only allows you to water daily, not hourly. So the different zones, we have 9 plots in our backfield, and 3 of them are underneath plastic, 6 of them aren't. When I say underneath plastic, they have like high tunnel or cat tunnel structures on them. So the different programs allow us to hook up all the stations that are underneath a high tunnel and allow those to all water together, and then all the ones that aren't under plastic can be on a different program and run for different amounts of time. And that's really nice with this system because it is connected to the weather. The high tunnel plots, even if it rains, they're not getting watered. Yeah, because the plastic is not allowing the rain to soak into the beds. So it's nice that through that system we can go in and for different programs we can disconnect it from the weather app so that it waters even if it's raining outside. Okay. So yeah, similar things, but things to consider before you buy a timer. Are you going to need electricity? If this is on a rural plot where you're not at, then you're going to want different options. And I have seen people where they can connect those to ones that do need electricity to like little solar panel systems. So there are other options that doesn't need Wi-Fi or an Ethernet cable. You can use that rain machine not hooked up to the weather app, but for the price, I really feel like you should have it connected to the weather. How many stations, how many different stations do you have? That's important. And how many different programs do you want to run? So on that rain machine one, we have the plots that are under high tunnels, like I said, and the ones that aren't. But then we also have the greenhouse connected to that. And the greenhouse is a misting irrigation. It's just trying to keep our little soil blocks from drying out. So that system, we need it to go off a lot more frequently. And it's kind of, that system in particular is kind of annoying because it doesn't have the hourly option. I have to go in and make a different program for every time throughout the day that I want the greenhouse stations to run. And with another nice thing about the rain machine timers is that they have a budget selection. So what I mean by that is you can like set the increment of how long you would want it to water, like the most amount of time that you would want any of your stations to water. And then as the weather changes, like as it cools off in the winter, you can, rather than going into each station and adjusting the amount of time that the plot is getting individually, you can just go in and turn down the budget. So you can go from 100% of the amount of water that you want down to like 50% when it starts to cool off. So other things to consider: do you want remote access? If you're going to be at the site every day, and it's just kind of a hobby, you probably don't need to be able to control it from your phone unless you like go on vacation a lot. And then with those different timers, you want to protect them from the sun and rain as much as possible. Some of them are made to be out in the weather, but still, most of the ones that I have had fail are because the little screen gives out just because it's always exposed to the sunlight. And then are you going to plumb the system or just leave it connected to hoses? And so if your timer is in a really sunny spot, like on the back of your house, even something as simple as like a little piece of cardboard taped over it can go a long way in helping it last longer. All right. Go ahead and play that other video clip. Okay, so this is a system that we have actually plumbed in. So we dug trenches, ran PVC pipe, ran wiring, and it's what's connected to our Rainbird. It's always a good idea to check for spiders before you stick your hand down in there. But it's hard to see from this image, but there is a little electrical component in there that when the electrical lever switches as the timer turns on, it twists a little dial in there that allows water to start seeping in, which expands the valve and allows water to flow freely. This system that we have here, I'll talk about that later actually. And then
where did you learn how to do that? That is so cool.
Adam Millsap did most of it and has just kind of taught me how to use it. But there's some really great resources out there that you can learn from, and I'll tell you more about that a little later. So this is what is down in the bucket that you couldn't see. So the wiring actually is ran clear back from that timer underneath the ground to our individual plot buckets. And yeah, this is the little piece that expands to allow water in and then allows it to flow through. Okay. So back to hoses. Before you do install a timer on a hose bed, it's a good idea to have a Y splitter put in directly to the spigot. That's just kind of a convenience thing. The timer's nice, but sometimes you just want to be able to quickly turn on and off a hose. And then it's a good idea to have plumber's tape and hose washers handy. You'd be surprised how much a drippy faucet adds up over time. So if you can just prevent that in the beginning, that'll save you from having to come back, take it apart, and fix it later. Quality quick release valves will make your life better. If you haven't used those in irrigation, you should go to Lowe's or Walmart and just even buy the cheaper brand. They're, I don't know, especially I feel like with older people, if you have any sort of arthritis problems, or like sometimes attaching hoses to the spigot like can be really difficult and annoying. But if you already have the quick release valve connected, then it's a really simple on-off thing.
That's a really good point. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and so just doing like 2 hoses is really difficult.
Yeah, it's really annoying. And once you use quick releases, and I used to think this like when I had used air hose applications that are all on quick release, I'm like, why is this not just the norm? It's so much easier. And then another thing to consider if you are going to be growing into what we call like the fringe seasons, either early spring or late fall or through the winter, it's a good idea to go ahead and add the heat tape right away. It's just easier to put on at the beginning, and then you're not panicking the first frost night. They have to take it all apart. Okay. So these are the quick releases that I was talking about. A set of 4 from Walmart or Lowe's is around $20. I'm really hard on stuff, I guess, just because we're using things daily. But if I get an entire season out of these, I'm happy, which, you know, broken down, they're $5 a piece, and it definitely saves me $5 worth of time and frustration to have these on. And before I attach these to a hose, I always use the plumber tape as well, just to prevent leaks. And I've seen some of these that are nice. They have, as soon as you disconnect, it actually stops the flow, which saves you another step and another piece of equipment. So here is an example of a heavier duty cam lock, which is basically the same. I use those words interchangeably, even though they're slightly different. You can order these online from proflowdynamics.com. You do have to purchase the different pieces separately, so you need to be really sure before you order that the pieces that you're buying go together. They're around $8 for the set, and they work with PEX tubing. You can see that these don't have any of the ridges on them, so you can't connect them to a hose. You actually have to plumb them into a PEX line. And I feel like there should be a heavy duty option like this that connects to a hose, but I can't find any. So if you come across any, let me know. And another important thing to note, if you have done anything with PEX and you've used pinch clamps, with these you do have to use a screw clamp. So ball valves, this is what I was talking about with those quick releases that shut off automatically. If you don't have that kind, then this will also save you steps. I put these like before any of our watering ones, just in case I want to switch them out. I usually use these in combination with the quick release. That little black plastic lever piece wears out before anything else does, which is annoying. I wish they would replace that with metal. Right now we have a pair of miniature vice grips on one of ours because the plastic is gone, but they last about a year. Yep. So now I'm gonna take a drink of water and then I'll jump into this. Okay, so we have, I often get questions about why we overhead water some things and why we use drip tape on other things. Overhead watering is better for the initial germination of seeds. It works well for direct seeded crops that are really dense, like a salad mix or carrots. It can help cool air around plants and soil, so things that don't germinate well in warmer weather, you can use overhead irrigation to help do a little temperature control. If you are using overhead watering, it's more important to water in the morning due to evaporation loss. It's also one of those old wives' tales that you shouldn't water in the sunlight because the water droplets are going to act like a magnifying glass and burn your leaves, which I just learned is not true. Apparently there's a bunch of research to back up that that is wives' tale, but you can still have fungus issues if you overhead water big leaves that then are going to sit there moist. So most sprinklers need replaced every few years. There can be freezing issues and damage if you're trying to four-season grow, and they can be inconsistent depending on your water source and pressure regulators. Where drip tape, we used to try to germinate our greens mixes with just drip tape, and it always, we got really poor germination. So this is one application where drip isn't good. It's nice because it delivers water to the base of the plant, which means less water lost to evaporation. There's also drip tape works really well, especially if you have it plumbed in like we do. It's nice because we really don't have to do much during the winter to protect those systems. The irrigation buckets that you saw in that video, we will sometimes put a straw bale over them if it's going to be really cold. But that whole system pretty much drains out every time, so you shouldn't have anything freeze and break. The drip tape itself only, they say it is only meant for a season, and that's how really big farms use it, but we try to get as many seasons out of it as we can. And it usually does last a whole year for us, if not two. But there's these couplings that you can use to fix leaks, and we do have to use those fairly frequently. It's better for large leaf plants. If you try to overhead water really dense large leaf plants, then it just kind of skirts the water off to the sides and doesn't allow it to get to the base of the plant. And there's things like tomatoes that have they have different, not pollen, but a different dusting of, I can't think of the word right now. But anyway, there's debris on the tomato leaves that the tomatoes like to be there. And if you're constantly overhead watering and washing that off, the tomatoes aren't gonna like that. Yep. And then the other application for it is anytime you are going to use plastic mulch or sheet mulch, overhead watering on top of that stuff is really kind of pointless. So here are, if you're a backyard gardener and you're just doing a small area, I would really recommend these if you are trying to direct seed and get things to germinate consistently. This is the Mystery Irrigation brand, and I have another picture of that. It's really great for, yeah, small systems. I like it because the little header piece that's on the top of that stake is interchangeable. So you can switch it out to water an entire 10 to 12 foot circle or a half circle, and there's even ones that do about a third of a circle. So this is the overhead irrigation that we use on the farm currently. These little pieces, I could not find them online to double check my price, but I know that we bought them at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're pretty cheap. I think it's like a packet of 10 for $3.50. We space these out in a row down the pathway between our beds, about 4 to 5 feet apart. And the circle that it waters is enough to cover 4 of our beds. So when we are going to use these, we tried to direct seed 4 beds in a row that all are going to want that overhead irrigation. And watch the video of that. Okay, so these are other options rather than the sprinkler if you are just going to have a really small system. Here's that. All these pieces fit into that small black tubing, and that tubing lasts a long time. Gotten several years use out of that. So this system connects to a 1-inch PEX tube. And this is how you make the hole in the PEX tube that allows you to make sure it's the right size. We'll see it in action. Okay, so you can see at the end we do have quick release, so we can quickly attach a hose. Then we have the different connector pieces that we need to get to the 1-inch PEX tubing there. We just have these pieces connected to cheap wooden stakes that we were able to get for free with a piece of wire or string. So you put them in the ground. You want to make sure that they're pretty secure, because when you turn the water on, sometimes the power can cause them to wiggle or work their way out. So you can, there's that ball valve that I was talking about. So if I can turn the water on and off here, it saves me from walking back to the spigot. Sometimes you have to mess with them. They get dirt in them, but you can see it's kind of hard to tell on the screen, but they put out a pretty good spray.
The work belt that you have looks awesome. I want one.
Yeah, a friend made that for me. She has an Etsy business called the 2 Belmont Sisters.
The 2 Belmont Sisters?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ooh, I'll look into that. Yeah, it looks really helpful.
Yeah, I like it. It's especially good when you're harvesting flowers.
Oh, yeah.
So a step up from those little sprinklers, and what pretty much everyone I know is moving to, is the Senegar's Wobbler. They're the way that it shoots the water out, it's a really thorough pattern, and it falls almost at that 90-degree angle to where it's more like a gentle rainfall, whereas sometimes sprinklers are kind of at an angle. There's a lot of different options. You can do circles that are 33 feet to 46, and I think there's even some bigger ones. They're range in price from $13 to $15 for the whole assembly. That means like the stake that it's connected to. You do still have to connect it into the PEX though. And you can get these online from Irrigation King. And then a great resource if you're not familiar in the area is Morgan County Seeds. They operate out of up by California, Missouri, and they have really a lot of really great options for a great price. So the drip tape we use is the Chapin brand. Again, it's meant to be used for a single season, but we get 2 to 3 years out of it typically, or 2 to 3 seasons. One great trick is using, I haven't seen them except on the farm in quite a while, but there used to be these old rolling hose carts that you could roll up your garden hose to move from place to place, and that's what we use for the drip tape, and it works really well. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but the holes on the drip tape face up, not towards the soil. So here you have a picture of what that looks like. It's kind of hard to see, but there's the drips are up, and then we have the valves, and down at the bottom we have it running into our PEX tubing and little baby lettuce plants. So another thing on this is we have our drip tapes spaced out, I think they're 7 inches apart. Our beds are 30 inches wide, so we just kind of, yeah, so they're 7 inches off center, and then that leaves us 8 inches on the sides. But that has, at least for transplanting, that works really well. So just so you kind of have some understanding of how the drip tape works, it's not like a soaker hose. It's not just the water isn't just running out the first hole that it comes to, because there's this little maze inside. This is a transparent image of what it looks like on the inside. So the water has to go through this little maze in order to get out the hole. So that means that the whole system, all your drip tape is filling up with water before any of it should be emitting and actually flowing out. So that allows you to get really consistent watering throughout an entire plot. And it's important to note that the water slowly follows a pyramid pattern down from the surface, or yeah, from the top of the soil. So you can let your drip tape run for like 20-30 minutes, and when you walk by looking at the soil, it looks like hardly any water has been released. But if you wait a little bit and then dig down, you can see that it is like the roots where the water actually needs to go. It's actually watering. So if you are going to use the drip tape system, don't buy the staples that they sell at most garden stores or hardware stores. They're not the one pictured, but the ones that they sell are basically like a really small thin gauge wire that in the Ozarks, where we have lots of rocks, they're probably not even going to go into your soil unless you're growing in a raised bed. But then they just don't hold, especially if you are growing in an area with wind. The wind can catch that drip tape and move it around, and those staples are not doing anything. So these are actually sod staples. They're about twice as big and a lot more heavy duty. They'll last us several years. Typically, we lose them before they give out. We buy them locally from Ewing Irrigation here in town. And it is kind of, you have to buy a box at a time that I think has like 500 in it. And it is kind of pricey just because it's like heavy metal, but it's worth it. Maybe you can go in on a box with several people if you don't need that many. And then yeah, to seal the end of the drip tape, it's as simple as just cutting off the end, folding the end of your drip tape back on itself, and then using that piece you cut off to secure it in place. So this is the PEX that we, one of the PEX options that we use. It's also known as orchard tubing. We refer to it as header line a lot as well. We use 1 inch. You can, yeah, depending on your system, how much water you need. The valves that we use, I think, can be used down to a 1/2 inch tube all the way up to 1.5 inches. This specific tube that we use is 660 feet for $110 from Morgan County. So here's a picture of the valves that we use. In the Morgan County catalog, I went ahead and included the number just because sometimes it's complicated in there what's what. They are $1.50 each, or $50 for $65. You can see on this one how we've snapped the top off. We did that on purpose. We use a walk-behind BCS tractor on our fields. And in the past, before we would break those off, if they would get ran over at an angle, it would break the entire little red surface, which would cause a leak. So if we just break that off automatically, it's a little harder to swivel, but it lasts a lot longer that way. When you buy these, you have to buy a hole punch separately for the PEX tubing. And if you think attaching a hose is a good hand workout, trying to make a bunch of holes for these header pieces is a really intense hand workout. So a couple years ago, after making several in a row and my hand being really bruised and sore, finally went and got the drill bit, and it works really, really well. You just have to be careful not to damage the back of the PEX. Like when it breaks through, you just need to really be on it, or you are probably going to spring a bigger leak later. So if you do make a long header valve, you just need to make sure that you're punching your holes for, yeah, if you're making header irrigation, then you need to make sure that you're punching the holes down the line in a straight line. So a good way to do that is to follow the writing. It's printed on there in a straight line. If you don't have something to follow, then what happens, because that whole roll has been rolled up for a long time, what naturally happens is you kind of start to twist around it. So then when you stretch it out next to your plot, some of the valves are angled up and some of them are angled down into the ground. So when you put these in, you want to be careful not to over tighten them. It's threaded, but it is plastic, so it's easy to break the threads there. And there is, I used to get really frustrated that these systems would drip, but it's just, yeah, it's gonna drip. So there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Sometimes you can get it perfect for a short period of time, but so these are the repair couplers that we use. They are more expensive per coupler than the entire 50-foot line of drip that we have down our bed. So we try not to just continually piece drip tape together with these. Anytime we flip a bed, if there is a coupler in the drip tape, then we'll go ahead and just throw that drip tape away or find another use for it, just because these are the expensive thing. Then it's important that if you are putting these in, when you cut the drip tape, you want to make sure and not to cut across the dripper hole, or else when you try to insert this little black and orange piece into the drip tape, then it'll just keep splitting down the line. So if you are using a drip tape system, it is important to attach pressure regulators to your water source. Most drip tape wants to be ran between 10 and 15 psi. Pressure regulators are pretty easy to come by. Most hardware stores have them in the irrigation section. And for most that connect to your typical household hose bib, they're just $10 to $15 If you're using drip, it's also important to have a filter. There's several different options out there. We use the Y-type filter because it's on the cheaper end, and it seems to work great for our system. And you'll see what I mean, but you need to clean them out occasionally. Okay, so this is just kind of a demonstration of most of the stuff I've been talking about. I'm using the plumbing tape on the hose bib thread there, and that's another easy thing to come by. They're pretty cheap, I think like $1.25 a roll in most irrigation sections. Then you can see I'm connecting, well, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a the first splitter valve right there connected at the base. Then that flows into the Y filter, and then the Y filter is flowing into the pressure regulator. I'm putting the plumber's tape on this connection as well. I feel like nothing is more frustrating than hooking together your system and then having a bunch of leaks that you have to go back and fix. So just put in a little bit of preventative time and it helps. So this is actually the irrigation to our front plot. What you saw earlier was to all of our back plots, which there's 9 in the back, and then up front we have 4. So I'm just using this cheaper timer that has the 4 different hose options. Pointing at the filter, so that is the clean out, and it comes with a little metal cap that you can pull off, but that's gone missing somewhere, so we just use another on-off spigot. You're not going to want to connect a hose to that end. The filter won't work properly if water's flowing out through it. So especially if you're on city water, that's just going to catch any residue that's coming through in your water.
Alyssa, we have a couple of questions. In the Q&A, we have a question from Laura. Do you have a written diagram of this layout from water source?
I don't, but if it's Laura Ernst, I can get you one. Yep.
And then we have another question in the chat. Laura Burdette asks, it's the same question. Do you have a written diagram of this layout?
No, I don't, but yeah. If you email me, if you want a written diagram, I can draw one out. My email is at the end of the presentation, but if you want it right now, it's Alyssa, ALYSSA, at Urban.
I'm typing it in the chat also.
Okay, cool. At urbanrootsfarm.com, and if you email me, I can draw one up and send it back to you.
Awesome.
Was there another question?
No, that's all up in the chat.
Okay, cool. And this is the heat tape, which I should have unplugged it from the electrical cord before I tried to wrap it around, but it just runs a small amount of electricity through that black wire to keep your faucet just above freezing temperature. So from that timer, we have all the different hoses hooked up, which connects to our PEX there, and then flows out the different header valves. And you can see those just twist on and off. I didn't want to pull it out because it's a pain to get back in, but and like I said, you want to be really careful to tighten, get it really snug, but don't over tighten. And the drip tape goes on to the drip tape connects to the valve just in the same way. You have to spin that little piece all the way back so as much of the tip is exposed as possible. You want to be careful and make sure that there's no little tears in the end of your drip tape that are going to cause extra dripping. I'm just saying you want to make sure not cut the emitters. And then you slide it on. Just get as secure as you can before twisting that back on. And you can twist that side pretty tight. So this is how we use, that was kind of quick, but those are just a piece of metal that we've bent around a hitch to make that candy cane shape, and those help us keep the header in place. Because when you go to stretch out the drip tape, if you don't have something holding the header in place, then your header will be really wonky. Yeah, and you need a couple different pieces to get from a hose valve to the PEX. And then, yeah, it's a quick release again. So common mistakes that people make with a drip system is one, overwatering, because like I talked about earlier, you're not really seeing the amount of water that's being put down. If you are concerned that your plants aren't getting enough, then you can always wait 30 minutes, dig out a hole on the edge of one of your beds, and kind of examine that cross view of how much water is in the soil. And then also, if you run it too high, at too high of a pressure, then each one of those emitters is going to turn into a sprinkler, like just a steady misting stream, and the water is not going to be where you want it. And then the other thing is exceeding the tubing capacity. So depending on your flow rate and your gallons per minute, if we were going to try and run the whole farm off one single continuous header, if it was in one line like that, then we would probably have some flow issues. So before you go and commit to a system like this, you need to see if you have enough flow to do that. Oops. So how many gallons per minute will your source emit? If an easy way to figure that out is to just turn your hose or wherever your water is coming from and time how long it takes to fill a 5-gallon bucket. And you can figure your gallons per minute from that. And then you need to figure out how many gallons per minute your drip tape is going to emit. So the drip tape that we use is 50 foot long. All of our beds are 50 foot long. And each bed has 50 feet of drip tape in them. Our drip tape emits 1 gallon per minute per 100 feet. So we have 150 feet per bed. Therefore, we have 1.5 gallons of water flowing out in each bed per minute. And each of our plots has 8 beds. So we need to make sure that we have enough flow to emit at least 12 gallons per minute. So that's, yeah, that doesn't feel like very much water, but what if you want to have multiple plots going at the same time? Or one issue that the farm originally ran into was not being able to wash vegetables at the same time that we were watering plots. So before they redid the irrigation on the farm, now we have a big 2-inch pipe that allows us to have a really incredible flow rate before we did that, we were just connected to a hose bib, and the irrigation basically had to run all day. It would like run to one plot, and we just had to keep switching it around because there just wasn't enough flow to water multiple plots at the same time. So if you have questions about this, a really engineering toolbox has a lot of great charts on how to do the math on these different, to figure out things for your different system. So yeah, I had never, like before we got into farming irrigation, I had never considered that there's friction between the water and the sides of the tube. Like, I don't think about there being friction between a liquid and plastic, but there is. So if you are going to commit to plumbing in your irrigation, you definitely need to do the math first and make sure your system has enough pressure and flow for your projected water usage. Consider where else down the line you want that water to go. If you plan on putting in a wash station or a pack shed or expanding and adding more plots, you know, go ahead and plan for the long haul, even if it's not come to fruition yet. If you are using municipal water, sometimes there's an option to get a discounted price for water not ran into the sewer. So if you're in Springfield and you look at your utility bill, you're getting charged one price for your water usage, and then you're getting charged a different price for your sewer usage. And because like they just track the one water usage rate, so we have to track the amount of water that we're putting on the ground, and we have to report that once a month, and then they deduct that amount from our bill. Because like they're not set up to automatically record how much water you're using compared to how much sewer you're using. So they just assume that all the water you're using is going into the sewer, but in our case that's not true. And then it's important to, you know, plan what your usage is. If you're gonna plan to farm year round, you need to make sure that what I call our mission control is really insulated and heated enough to withstand the coldest winter temps. You'll see in the video, but we have a big foam insulated box around our mission control now. And we also have heat tape running around the pipes. When I first started here, that wasn't the case. And the owners went on vacation to Florida in the middle of the coldest winter that we've had in like 10 years. And I did my farm walk one morning, but I was like really reluctant to get out because it was so cold out. And when I went to the backfield, it was flooded because one of our major pipes had burst, and just like so much freezing cold water. It was awful. So yeah, it's going to be worth it to plan ahead.
So if that happens, do you guys immediately put foam on the pipes and then run like hot water? How do you guys, well, no, because then it would crack even more, right?
Yeah, so we just had to, like, thankfully there was a master shutoff valve where the water was running into the property that I was able to shut off. And then it was a lot of work. We had to run, we had to irrigate everything by hose and bucket from another water source until it thawed out enough that we were able to like dig out that system and completely replace the pipe. So
oh, brutal.
Yeah, it was awful. So there's that mission control that I was talking about with the blue irrigated box. It's painted just for sun protection.
Alyssa, we have a question from Laura Burdett. Are your strategies the same for greenhouse and high tunnel irrigation?
Yeah, they're really similar. You'll see a little bit later how we use our the things that we do differently for our greenhouse irrigation. But our greenhouse and our plumbed lines that go to our back plot all flow out of this mission control.
Awesome. That's it on the chat.
So you can see down here, this is the meter that tracks how much water we're putting onto the ground, and that's the data that I report. We also have a giant backflow valve, and you can see this pipe is a pretty wide pipe. It's because we have so much water going to the fields, and then we also have the pack shed water farther up this line, which all that water eventually goes into our rain garden, so that's not sewer either. But in the pack shed, we're opening up a 1-inch diameter tube to fill our sinks really fast, so we need a lot of water flow and a lot of water pressure. So these are set up too with that Y filter there. We have big ball on and off valves. Each one of these systems, so we have 9 plots in the back, and we have it like our plot is a big tic-tac-toe grid is how I describe it, and each one of those pipes goes out in a straight line and services 3 plots. So we're able to, that just allows us to have more control. If there is an issue somewhere down the line, we don't have to turn off the entire system to fix it. And you can kind of see there's that black heat tape wrapped around, just another spin filter that has to get cleaned out occasionally. And you can see we have the option to attach different hoses there as well. Nope. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then if this is all really overwhelming to you and you're just doing a backyard garden, there are these kits that you can get at Lowe's that come with everything, and they're really great. I've used these in different bee gardens that I've installed over the years, and for different raised bed and container gardens that I've helped install. And like for the price and yeah, just not having to think about all the little individual pieces, this is a really great option. I feel like it's worth the money. So fertigation. So I'm going to talk about fertigation, and then we'll go into the greenhouse system. My presentation ends after the greenhouse system, so if there's any questions that you have, just feel free to hop in. So fertigation is the process of injecting an irrigation system with a water-soluble fertilizer. It is a mostly passive process, which allows you to start the system, move on to something else, and then come back and finish out the process. If you're just walking up and down rows with a backpack sprayer trying to fertilize your plants or doing it with a water can, there's a lot of human error involved, just depending on the mix and whether it's agitated correctly. And, you know, sometimes we are a little heavy-handed at the beginning and then there's not enough at the end. So the fertigation that we use is Neptune's Harvest. It's a hydrolyzed fish fertilizer, and it has seaweed in it as well. I'll show you a video, but the Mazai injector is the one that we used. It's $40 just for the actual fertigation piece. There's a lot of smaller plumbing pieces included that you need for the system, but the $40 is just for the little injector itself. You can buy pre-made kits from Morgan County, which, I don't know, I'm all about saving time at this point, because I have put these systems together and then realized I was missing one piece, so that's another trip to the hardware store, or something breaks, or you start to glue it together with PVC glue, which is not forgiving, and you realize you did something backwards. So buying the kit already built is a great way to go your first time. Okay, so that's the system that I was talking about. The little copper piece with the black tube coming out is the injector that I was talking about. And then there's all those other little PVC pieces that are included. So this is coming from the blue tube, has water coming in from our mission control. And yeah, there's the different valves. So currently water typically is just free flowing through that to the hose. But if we do want to fertilize through our hose water, then we just have to flip those. Well, you take a bucket, you dilute your fish emulsion, stick this little black hose into the bucket so it's allowing it can pick up the fertilizer, and then you block the water off there on the right and allow it to redirect through there, and that'll pick up the fish emulsion and put it into our hose. And then and this little video is really great. It's by Adam, the owner. He was teaching his new crew how to do fertigation, and it's a really great teacher and it's really comprehensive. So I'm going to play it, but it is a little bit longer. So if you have any questions, pop in.
So fish emulsion.
And he says something here that is wrong right off the bat about using fish emulsion rather than hydrolyzed fish, but he has that backwards.
Is what we're using, and the ground rate that I found for that, and from a couple different sources, so I feel like it's a good one, is 4 gallons, and they put it as 4 gallons per 100 gallons per acre. So what they're doing is they're using a 100-gallon sprayer, they're putting 4 gallons in it, and they're spraying it over an acre. What really matters in that number is what?
Ratio.
Right, and which ratio?
The 4 gallons to 100.
Exactly. We want to know how much fish emulsion per amount of ground, right? So it's the fish emulsion to the square footage or acreage number that we're after. So that's 4 gallons per acre. Anybody want to take a stab at how we would calculate how much ground we have here or how much fish emulsion we have here based on that? So you could do the bed feet. I'm comfortable with a rougher number than that on this. But you're right. You would want to take your 30-inch bed and multiply it by the length and then times 9 beds in here, right? I'm comfortable with a rougher number. I know that my tunnels are 96 feet long, 34 feet wide. And it's certainly not going to harm anything for me to feed the soil a little bit more with this product. There are other products where that wouldn't be good. But fish emulsion is only 2% nitrogen. This fish emulsion is only 2% nitrogen. So the likelihood that we're going to overfeed is pretty low. So yeah, I took that 4 gallons. We're going to feed on the ground, not foliarly today. So I took that 4 gallons per acre. And then I took my square footage in here, which is 96 feet by 34 feet, which comes out to around 3,500 feet. And then I took my 43,000 square feet-ish in an acre, and I divided that by my 3,500, right? And that tells me that I have a 1/13 of an acre in this plot, in this tunnel. So given that I have a 1/13 of an acre, I now know that I need 1/13 of my 4 cups, 4 gallons of fish emulsion, right? Okay, now where do I go? What do I need to know now? I still have to downsize this quite a bit, right? Right now I know that I need a 1/16 of 4 gallons. How do I do that? How do I put it in the bucket?
Make it into cups.
Right. So I take my 4 gallons, I multiply it by my 16 cups, right? And then I divide that by 13. And that tells me how many cups of fish emulsion go in my bucket, right? from there, the amount of water that I put in my bucket doesn't really matter. That's the 100-gallon number that we started with, right? It doesn't really matter as far as what the plants are going to receive. The only reasons that I do want to pay a little bit of attention to that, because I'm not just going to stick my little sucker in 4 cups of, or 5 cups of fish emulsion and let it go, right? What would happen in this system if I did that?
We get clogged.
It would probably get clogged,
the
right?
tube.
So the viscosity of the liquid is an issue.
Yeah.
And to thin it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the bigger problem, is that if we look at this system, it has no water in it right now. All my drip tapes are flat, right? And when we turn the system on, what we see is that these 2 will fill up, and then it'll start pushing water out to the others. And so if I had a very small amount of liquid to feed all of this tunnel, what would likely happen is I would feed the first couple rows, and the rest would just get water. So I want to avoid that. And the calculation there, which I did not do this morning, and as I'm thinking about it right now, I probably don't actually have as much liquid as I should here. So the calculation there is a little more complex. Basically, you're calculating the volume of a cylinder that is 96 feet long and of the diameter of these drip tapes. And then you're multiplying that by, in here, we have 2 tapes per bed, right? So you're multiplying that by 2 times 9. Which is actually quite a lot of water. And so I would guess that by the time we have this whole system filled, this bucket's going to be gone, right? And maybe isn't even going to get those up there. So that said, does somebody want to grab another bucket? You want to grab another bucket of water, Alex? And we'll go ahead and fill it with water, and we'll just dilute it. So we run through 2 buckets. Because you could get yourself in in one feeding, you're probably not going to notice the difference of that. But if we're doing this every couple of weeks, which is what we want to do to support the fruit production in here, if we're doing that every couple of weeks, by the end of the summer, you're going to see a really big difference on those plants over there. They're going to be a lot more stressed out, and they're not going to be producing the way these others are.
There is a further dilution that's going on as the water comes in.
There is, you're right. And that's, the problem is I don't know what that number is.
Okay.
And it's a really hard number to calculate. At least it's a really hard number to calculate without pressure gauges on this system. So the way the Mazzy injectors work, which is what this is. So our injector is up here. This is made by Mazzy. This is a Mazzy 584 3/4 inch injector. And the way that they work is based on pressure drop. And so as our water comes in on one side, we adjust this valve to reduce the pressure on the other side of our injector. And it causes vacuum in this hose when we do that, and pulls liquid up into there. And so there's not a whole lot of risk in me over diluting this, not with 10 gallons of liquid. There is a much higher risk in me under diluting it and not getting it out everywhere. So I'd rather have an overly diluted solution that takes a little bit longer to get everywhere than the other way around. And in the real world, really the way to figure this out is to put yourself a 5-gallon bucket of water over here and see how long it takes to run it out, because you can calculate your gallons per minute of flow in here, and that'll tell you whether or not you're getting it everywhere, right? And it would also tell you your rate. So we get our gallons per minute, and then we can calculate how long it took us to run through our 5 gallons. You guys want to take a stab at how you would calculate your gallons per minute out here? This is the not fun part of it.
I know, I'm like
isn't it?
thinking, I'm like, what's the wrong answer, what's the right?
Right. So all of our drip tapes come in different configurations. And the configuration that we use throughout the farm is it's an emitter every 4 inches. And it drops water at a rate of 1 gallon per 100 feet per minute. So for every 100 feet of tape, we have about 1 minute puts 1 gallon of water under that tape. So from there, you can take, we've got basically 200 feet of tape in each bed. We've got 1,800 feet in the plot with 9 beds. And so we can say that we're going to put down every minute 18 gallons of water, right? Do that right? So we got 1,800 feet divided by 100, 1 gallon per minute. Yeah, 18 gallons per minute in here. So wow. it's a lot of water. It goes down pretty fast, and so that leaves us with the ability to calculate that. We're not going to do that today because I'm confident with this one. This is how we've always done it. So we've got our system set up. Talk our fertigator through real quick here. So there is a flow arrow on your injector up here. That is very, very important. You will put 0 fertigation down. You'll put 0 nutrient on the ground if you have this backwards, and if you have this inlet and outlet reversed. Okay. So given that the flow is this direction, this end gets hooked to our inlet end, right? Our source water. The reason this thing looks so gangly is so that we can twist these around and feed whatever configuration we need, depending on what plot we're in, because our boxes didn't all line up exactly the same way, if you can imagine that. So enemies of this irrigation system are junk in the lines and particulate in the water. So as we unhook this, we're going to be really careful that we're not getting stuff in our system, right? I'm going to grab this, drag it in here. Anybody have a radio? Yeah. Will you holler at Alex? I think we'll just run it like this and see how long it takes. Because he makes a good point that we're going to dilute it quite a bit. So,
you don't need the water?
No. It's probably just finishing it up, right? Yeah. So we've got our cam lock connectors here. They work just like this. You just pop these out, and it'll pop right apart, okay? And make sure we don't get any junk in there. Everything out here, I think, Lizzie, now, everything out here is set up to flow this way? Don't know?
As we do it, we're putting it all in that direction.
So as you fertigate out here, and as we install these, and as we hook the fertigator up to ones that are already installed, you may find that the female and male ends are reversed. That's why it's going to be really important for you to pay attention to the flow and understand that, because you may have to reverse these in this system, okay? Don't reverse them on this system, reverse them on this system. So we're going to hook up to our source over here. And our outlet over here. Like that. And then what's happening here is we've got our water coming in on this end. When we start, we're going to have this all closed off like that. And our water is going to come in, it's going to run up to this valve, and it's going to go nowhere. We're going to start with this valve all the way, actually we're going to start with this valve all the way open. So it's going to run through the system, bypassing the injector, and running into our irrigation system, right? And actually, I think we will, as I think about it, something that we can do to avoid that distribution issue is to go ahead and fill the system before we start. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and do that now. So I've got this valve open. I've got my source water hooked up to my inlet side, and I've got my outlet hooked up to the irrigation side. I'm just going to turn my valve quarter turn the way we do, and then I'm going to watch all my drip tubes fill up. So they are full. So Alex, we were just realizing that we can avoid our distribution issue if we fill the system before we put fish emulsion in it. So
we still use this bucket somehow.
Alex can go get a whole bucket of water for us. All right, so while we wait for that to fill up, let's talk about drip irrigation and why we use that. So you guys know we use 2 different types of irrigation on the farm. I actually use 3 different types of irrigation on the farm. But we use the drip system, which we use for a couple of reasons. Lots of crops benefit from having the water put just on their roots and not on their foliage. Tomatoes are a really good example of that. Tomatoes have resins on their foliage that they like to have there, and it's hard on them when we wash those off with lots of overhead watering. So water at the root zone is healthy for them. It promotes better plant health and it promotes better yields for us. So that's one reason. The other reason is water conservation. In the Midwest, we're really fortunate to have tons of water, but we still want to be careful with it and only use what we need. Here we pulled water out of an aquifer, and that aquifer is dropping about a foot a year right now. So we are contributing to that. Agriculture is contributing to that. Agriculture uses a ridiculous amount of water, and so we want to do everything we can to be conscious of that and reduce our consumption, make sure we're not overwatering, and make sure that we're using methods that reduce the amount of water that is required to get our plants what they need. There's a couple ways that it does that. It reduces evaporation by putting the water right on the ground. When we spray water into the air, especially when plants need it on those super hot summer days, we lose an immense amount of that water to evaporation. Every time that we choose to water on the ground rather than through the air, we are reducing water consumption. Now, as you guys know, we use some overhead irrigation here as well. And the reason that we do that is because some crops don't do well without really, really thorough distribution of the water. So good examples of that are like our cut greens and things. It's just very difficult to get those to germinate evenly. With even 4 drip tapes across a 30-inch bed, it's really hard to get them to germinate evenly. And the reason for that is that when you put water on beds with drip tape, what you see is a water distribution pattern that starts at the top of the bed where the water comes out of the drip tape and it runs out like this. And it's a pretty shallow angle, but for all those little seeds that we just put, half an inch underground for them to germinate, they don't see any of that water unless they're right against the drip tape. So for years at Urban Roots, we experimented with starting them with overhead irrigation and then moving to drip irrigation. So we put the drip tapes in the beds, we germinate them with overhead, and then we shift over. But in the long run, we found that we just get much better results with overhead on those crops, those cut and come again crops that are bed wide. And so that's why we do it that way. I think the drip tapes are about full now, so let's turn this off for a second. And this is our suction hose. We're just going to drop that into our fish emulsion solution over here. We're going to open these guys up. So it has a path through the injector now. And we're going to leave that all the way open for the moment. Okay, so the brass valve, the gate valve, is still open all the way, so we can totally bypass the system. What you're probably going to see is that we're not going to suck anything up this hose. I hope that's what you see. So nothing coming through the hose yet. So we're still just pushing water straight through with no suction happening over here. And then we're going to just start turning this down until we see this start to pick up. So what we're doing effectively is we are reducing the pressure on the downstream side of our injector. And so as we reduce that pressure, we're going to see suction begin to happen in this hose, in our pickup hose. And I want to adjust it down just until I see it begin to pick up. And that again has to do with our distribution pattern. I want to put this down as slowly as this injector will allow me to put it down, so that I have as high a rate of dilution as I move it into there. That way I don't leave anything out, don't leave any of the plants out.
So we just turned off 2 drip tapes, row 9 and row 5.
Okay, so here we go. It's just starting to take up now. And that's what we're after right there. It's just a solid stream flowing through our pickup hose. And you can see it's starting to suck it down pretty fast over here. And that'll be something you want to just walk back by and check in on occasionally as you're doing this, making sure that nothing's clogged and that it's still feeding. As with anything out here on the farm, if your result is not what you expected, then check in with somebody who might be able to help.
All right, so that was a really thorough explanation of how the fertigation system works, but it is one of the more complicated parts of our irrigation. And then, let's see. With our greenhouse irrigation, the things that we do, the different tricks that we have, one of them is we have an overhead hose, cable, and pulley system. It, depending on what time of year it is, sometimes the greenhouse is really full. Like we have tables taking up almost every square feet covered in plants. So we don't want to have to drag a hose through that maze of tables and legs and milk crates that we grow in. And then we have irrigation ran down either wall where we have plants the majority of the year. It's a 1/2-inch PVC system that is all connected. It's just hanging, supported by conduit and simple wire. You can buy the misting pieces that we use from Irrigation King, and it's a really good idea to clean those, I don't know, about once a year with vinegar. You just take the system apart, and it's specifically the misting pieces that get clogged up with calcium and other deposits. So if you just let those soak in vinegar for 12-ish hours and shake it a couple times during that period, then that'll break all those minerals loose. It's important in the greenhouse, as I've mentioned, to have a timer with hour intervals rather than days if you are going to do a system like soil blocking. But even if you're not, even if you're just growing in small containers, especially this time of year when it's really sunny and hot, especially in a greenhouse or plastic structure, you don't want those seedlings drying out. Usually when soil gets too dry, it's a lot harder to rehydrate it. So, and then another trick that I like to use around the farm is the lightweight hoses. If you have never used those, they will totally make your life better. I've used the 0G. They are more expensive. The Hydrix Direct has really great reviews, and they're a decent price as well. But if you haven't used those, they're just like super lightweight, and they fill up and expand. They're more of a fabric material than rubber. But don't buy the cheap ones of those, because I've seen those like blow after just a few months. Nope. I'll show you the video of that. Maybe. So here's that cable system I was talking about. We just have the pulleys. Every so often you just want to figure out where, how far down you want the hose to hang, and put as many pulleys as you need to make that happen. These are our emitters over the tables. We have each of our tables set up so that we can shut them off, and then we just load from, we always fill from one side with plants so that we're not misting tables that don't have plants on them. It's a pretty simple system. It just screws on like the PVC. You're just gluing together in those different 90s down the line. These are spaced out about 4 feet apart, which seems to be a good distribution for us for how high off the soil blocks they are. And then it's kind of hard to see in the video, but this is one that was just, it's not, when they get clogged, they don't stop altogether. They just start dripping, which if there's little baby plants underneath, it'll cause the water to puddle, which is not good. So that's when you need to take them apart and soak them in vinegar. All right. And that is all I have for you. Are there any questions?
There are no questions, but that was amazing. I mean, I learned so much. It's crazy. I wonder if there is a tax write-off for if you record, you mentioned water going to sewer and then water going into the ground. I wonder if there's like a tax write-off if you record how much water you use for the farm.
No. I mean, I bet if you were to partner up with like some sort of water conservation system, like in your area, I bet there would probably be different grants that you could get to install your system if you're letting them know like what the water usage is for. Because yeah, anytime you can allow water to soak back into the earth where you're at, as compared to going back into septic, it's a positive thing for rivers and streams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today for this workshop.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah.
So after this Zoom call, there will be a survey that will pop up for everyone to fill out in regards to how the survey went. And those surveys go to the USDA to provide grants so that we can continue doing these workshops. So feel free to fill that out. And awesome. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Thanks. Bye.
Awesome.